My workshop in the basement smells of oil, metal, and time. Here, among dozens of mechanisms ticking away in unison, I feel at home. Clocks speak to me in a language I understand better than human speech. They never lie or pretend. If a mechanism is broken, it simply stops. No accusations, no complaints. Today, a Civil War-era pocket watch lies on my workbench. It was brought to me by Oliver Paxton, the owner of the only antique shop in our town. This watch has been silent for almost 150 years, but I know I can make it tick again. My hands are not as dexterous as they used to be. At 67, my joints are starting to remind me of themselves. But my eyes can still see the smallest details, and I have more patience than I did in my youth. Restoring antique clocks takes time, an irony I appreciate. My name is Beatrice Merlot, but everyone except my children calls me Bea. I worked as the Port Haven lighthouse keeper for 32 years until the authorities automated it 8 years ago. Then I retrained as an antique clock restorer. A hobby I'd had all my life became a way to earn a living. Not that there are many customers in Frostridge, a town of 4,000 on the north coast, but I have enough. My phone vibrated, breaking the silence of the workshop. It was Meredith. My daughter only calls for 2 reasons, to complain or to ask for something, sometimes both at the same time. "Mom, you didn't forget about dinner tonight, did you?" Her voice sounded as if she was already sure I had forgotten. "Good afternoon, Meredith." "No, I didn't forget. 6 o'clock at your place." "7, Mom. We agreed on 7. She sighed with that particular tone of irritation that comes into her voice when she talks to me. "And don't forget the pie. You promised to bake an apple pie." I hadn't promised, but there was no point in arguing. "Okay, there'll be pie. And try not to be late. Last time we waited 20 minutes for you. The traffic light was broken and there was a traffic jam." I had explained this 4 times, but Meredith still told the story of my tardiness to everyone she knew, as if it were the crime of the century. "I'll be on time." She hung up without saying goodbye. Thursday family dinners are a tradition that Meredith upholds with the zeal of a religious fanatic. Every week we gather at her house, my son Quentin with his wife Vanity, me, and sometimes my grandchildren, if they deign to come. On the surface, everything looks perfect. A caring daughter regularly brings the family together around the table, except that these dinners are more like a courtroom, where I am the eternal defendant. I put down my tools and covered the clock with a soft cloth. The pie won't bake itself, and I need to buy apples. Climbing the creaky stairs, I went into my small living room. The house I live in belonged to my parents. It's old but sturdy, just like me. The Frostridge Food Supermarket was almost empty. It was a Thursday in November at 3 in the afternoon, not the busiest time of day. I was methodically selecting apples when I heard a familiar voice. "Bea, it's been ages." Della Hope, my former neighbor and probably the only person in town I can call a friend. She's 72, but she has enough energy for 3. She trained service dogs for the police and border guards for 30 years, and now she volunteers at an animal shelter. "Hello, Della. How are you?" Same old, same old. The arthritis is getting worse, but I ignore it, and we get along just fine." She glanced at my basket. "Family dinner again?" "Yes, back in the dock." Della shook her head. "I don't understand why you keep going to those dinners. Your Meredith always finds something to complain about." "She's my daughter, Della." "So what? That doesn't give her the right to treat you like a free babysitter and housekeeper." I didn't say anything. What could I say? Della was right, but admitting it out loud would mean admitting that I had raised a daughter who didn't respect me. "By the way," Della lowered her voice, "I heard that Abbott is selling his apartment in the new complex. You were interested, weren't you?" I quickly glanced around. "Not here," I whispered. Della was the only one who knew about my secret plan. For over 20 years, I had been saving money, at first a little at a time, then more substantial amounts. After selling my parents' house in Portland, the amount had grown significantly. My children knew nothing about these savings. They weren't very interested in my affairs, unless they needed something. Della and I agreed to meet for coffee tomorrow and finished our shopping. When I got home, I started baking a pie, trying not to think about the evening ahead. At 6:45, I parked my old Ford in front of my daughter's house. The two-story, pseudo-colonial house looked just like all the other houses in the neighborhood, pretentious and faceless. I took the pie and headed for the front door, which was decorated with a wreath of artificial autumn leaves. The door was opened by my son-in-law, Dexter Harlow. Tall, with thinning hair and a perpetual smile, he always made me feel like I was talking to a salesman who was about to offer me something. In fact, he was a salesman. He sold industrial air conditioners. "Ah, Beatrice, you're almost on time." He glanced at his watch, even though I knew for a fact that I was 15 minutes early. "Hello, Dexter. Come on in, everyone's in the dining room." "Oh, you brought a pie." He said this with such surprise, as if I usually brought rocks. Meredith, Quentin, and Vanity were sitting in the dining room, and to my surprise, both grandsons, Ezra and Fletcher, were there too. "Grandma's here," Dexter announced in a tone that suggested a circus horse had entered the room. "Hi, Mom." Quentin stood up to hug me. My son, unlike his sister, had always been softer, maybe too soft. Vanity had her wrapped around her little finger. "Hello, Quentin." "Vanity." I nodded to my daughter-in-law, who barely looked up from her phone. "You're 2 minutes late," Meredith said instead of a greeting. "We're already seated." "I'm sorry," I replied automatically, even though the clock on the wall showed 6:58. "Hi, Grandma." Ezra, my 18-year-old granddaughter, waved from across the table. With a new tattoo on her wrist and purple streaks in her dark hair, she looked like an alien among this impeccably conservative family. No wonder we got along better than she did with the rest of them. "Hi, Ezra. Fletcher." I nodded to my grandson, who muttered something unintelligible without looking up from his phone. I sat down in the empty seat next to Ezra, and Meredith immediately began to divide the food among the plates. "Mom, you know Fletcher is lactose intolerant. Why did you bring a pie with whipped cream?" "There's no whipped cream on the pie," I replied calmly, "but there will be when we serve it. Now we'll have to make a separate dessert for him." I said nothing. Fletcher hadn't been lactose intolerant until last week, when Vanity read an article about the dangers of dairy products. "How's work, Mom?" Quentin asked, trying to change the subject. "Not bad. I'm restoring a Civil War pocket watch." "You're messing around with old junk again," Meredith snorted. "You should find a real job." "I like my job." "What job? Digging around in ancient mechanisms for pennies?" She shook her head. "At your age, you should be thinking about the future." I almost laughed. At my age, the future is considerably shorter than the past, as Meredith should know very well. "Grandma's clock is cool," Ezra interjected. "She restored a clock for a museum in Portland." Meredith ignored her. "By the way, Vanity got a promotion," she said, looking at my sister-in-law with such admiration as if she had just won the Nobel Prize. "She's now the senior administrator at Strike Zone." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. The Strike Zone bowling alley was the only entertainment in our town, apart from the 2-screen movie theater. "Thanks." Vanity finally tore herself away from the phone. "Now I have 3 people working under me, and my salary is 15% higher." "That's great." "See, Mom," Meredith chimed in, "people are growing, building careers. They're not just sitting around for decades." I said nothing, spearing a piece of roast with my fork. 32 years on a lighthouse was not sitting still. Every day I climbed a 187 steps, in storm and calm and snow and heat, to keep the lighthouse running smoothly. I saved the lives of 3 fishermen when their boat capsized off the rocks during a storm. But Meredith didn't want to remember that. "And Dexter has a new client," Meredith continued, "the Northern Lights Shopping Center." "Really?" I feigned interest. "Yes, a $150,000 contract," Dexter announced proudly. "A complete overhaul of the air conditioning system. Impressive. What's going on with you, Grandma?" Ezra asked. "Besides the cool watch." I opened my mouth to respond, but Meredith beat me to it. "What could be happening with your grandmother? It's the same old story, sitting in her basement tinkering with watches that no one needs." "They're needed by their owners," I said quietly. "Of course," Meredith said sarcastically. "You're our irreplaceable expert." An awkward pause hung over the table. Fletcher continued to stare at his phone. Vanity sent messages. Quentin picked awkwardly at his food. Only Ezra looked at me with sympathy. "By the way," Dexter broke the silence, "we're planning to renovate the kitchen." We're thinking of getting granite countertops and new appliances. Yes, Meredith chimed in, a modern kitchen, not as antediluvian as yours, Mom. I like my kitchen. Because you're afraid of change. You've spent your whole life in the four walls of a lighthouse, and now you're in a basement. I slowly put down my fork. A lighthouse isn't four walls. It's a whole world, full of the sounds of the sea, the cries of seagulls, the changing light. It's responsibility for people's lives. But Meredith never understood that. And you, Fletcher, how's your job? I asked my grandson, deciding to change the subject. Fine, he muttered without looking up. Fletcher's a senior courier now, Vanity announced proudly. He has his own company car. That's great, I smiled at my grandson. Do you like it? It's okay, he repeated, but it's just temporary. I'm going to college next year. What are you going to study? Business administration, Vanity interjected. With his grades, he can get into a good college. What do you want to do, Fletcher? I asked directly. He looked up at me for the first time. I don't know yet. Maybe something with computers. Computers aren't serious, Vanity said. Business is the future. I remained silent again. It wasn't my place to interfere in their decisions, although I felt sorry for Fletcher. How are your tattoos, Ezra? I asked. My granddaughter's face lit up. I got an apprenticeship at Ink Needle. I start next week. That's wonderful. Congratulations. I don't see what there is to be happy about, Meredith grimaced. Drawing ugly pictures on people is not a career. It's art, Mom, Ezra snapped. Art, Meredith burst out laughing. Real art hangs in galleries, not on the bodies of misfits. By the way, lots of successful people have tattoos, I pointed out. Oh, don't you start defending her weird hobbies. Meredith rolled her eyes. It's enough that she's seen enough of your lifestyle. What lifestyle? I couldn't help asking. This one, Meredith raised her voice. Living like a hermit with no ambitions, no achievements. You've always been like that, content with little, striving for nothing. As if sitting on a lighthouse and cleaning lenses is the height of your dreams. A heavy silence hung over the table. Even Fletcher looked up from his phone. I'm proud of my work at the lighthouse, I said quietly, and what I'm doing now. Of course you are, Meredith snorted, because you haven't achieved anything else. You don't even have your own place. You live with your parents. Dexter and I are buying our second house. Mom, Quentin tried to stop her. No, let her hear it. Meredith was unstoppable. I've spent my whole life trying not to repeat your mistakes. When people ask me what my mother does, I'm ashamed to say that you tinker with old watches. I finished my roast in silence, even though I couldn't swallow a bite. Then I carefully wiped my lips with a napkin and looked at my daughter. Thanks for dinner, Meredith. You can keep the pie. I got up from the table. Where are you going? Meredith asked in surprise. We haven't served dessert yet. I'm full and tired. You're always like this. Meredith threw up her hands. You take the truth personally. I'm not offended. I just have to go. Grandma, I'll walk you out. Ezra also got up from the table. We went into the hall and Ezra helped me put on my coat. I'm sorry about Mom, she said quietly. She's just like that. It's okay, sweetie. Don't worry about it. She's wrong about you, and about tattoos, too. I smiled and stroked her cheek. I know. Good luck at Ink Needle. You're talented. Thanks, Grandma. I'll come by on the weekend and show you my new sketches. I'll be waiting. I stepped out into the cold November evening and headed for my car. Meredith's words echoed in my head. You've achieved nothing. You don't even have a place of your own. They didn't know. None of them knew that I had an appointment with a real estate agent the following week. The apartment in the new Highland View complex was almost mine. 2 bedrooms, mountain views, paid in full, no mortgage, no debt. I could have bought a house, but I decided an apartment was more practical, less maintenance. I had been saving for 23 years. At first, it was small amounts, then larger sums. I invested with the help of a financial advisor in Portland. All this time, I kept quiet, not telling my children about my plans. Why? So that Meredith could find a way to belittle this achievement? So that Vanity could hint that I could help them with a new kitchen? So that Dexter could suggest a lucrative investment of my savings in some dubious company? No, my silence was deliberate. So was my decision to show them the apartment documents once the deal was finalized. Not to brag, but to put an end to the endless humiliation. To say without words, I am not a failure. I have not wasted my life. I do not need your pity or approval. Meredith will soon find out what I've achieved. And maybe, for the first time in her life, she'll have nothing to say. The frosty morning in Frostridge reminded me of my first days at the Port Haven Lighthouse. Back then, in 1983, I was only 25, and the job of caretaker seemed like a temporary gig. No one imagined I would stay there for 32 years. I remember climbing the 187 steps of the spiral staircase for the first time, carrying a heavy bag of groceries and books to keep me company. The lighthouse greeted me with coldness and echoing emptiness. For the first few weeks, I fell asleep to the frightening howling of the wind and the crashing of waves against the rocks. But gradually, these sounds became a lullaby, and the lighthouse became my home. Now, as I stoke the stove in my old house, I often think about those times, about night watches, ship horns in the fog, birds crashing into the lantern glass during storms, about how I learned to repair the diesel generator and predict the weather by the shades of the sky, about the daily entries in the logbook, which I kept with meticulous precision. That precision and attention to detail came in handy in my watch restoration work and in my secret plan. I poured myself some coffee and opened my laptop. After last night's dinner at Meredith's, I wanted to check my accounts, as if my daughter's words could somehow reduce the amount of my savings. But the numbers on the screen reassured me. $684,352.17. More than enough to buy an apartment in Highland View and live comfortably for the foreseeable future. No one but Della knew about my finances. Even Owen Baxter, my financial advisor in Portland, was surprised by my secrecy. "Beatrice, you could have bought yourself a decent place a long time ago," he said at our last meeting 3 months ago. "Why do you continue to live in that old house?" "I'm waiting for the right moment," I replied, and I wasn't lying. I started saving when Meredith was 19 and Quentin was 22. After my divorce from their father, my salary as a lighthouse keeper was my only source of income. $400 a month isn't much, but I managed to set aside $50 every month without fail. At first, it was just a habit. Then, when Meredith went to college, I started putting away $100. My side job repairing watches allowed me to increase the amount. By 2000, I had $36,000 in the bank, enough to help Meredith with the down payment on a house when she married Dexter. She never found out about it. I sent the money through the bank as an anonymous transfer. I didn't want her to feel obligated, or more likely decide that she could count on my help in the future. I helped Quentin when he married Vanity, too, also anonymously. And then I started saving for myself. Not for luxury. I never wanted expensive things. For freedom. For the chance to look my children in the eyes one day and say, "I'm independent. I took care of myself. I don't need your help or approval." A phone call interrupted my thoughts. It was Della. "B, you didn't forget, did you? We agreed to meet for coffee at 10. "I remember," I replied, glancing at my watch. It was 9:45. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Great. I have news about Abbott's apartment." I smiled. Della was always one step ahead of me when it came to local gossip and useful information. Not surprising, spending half your life working with police dogs means you have connections in the right places. 15 minutes later, I was sitting across from Della at the Harbor, the only decent coffee shop in Frostridge. It was owned by Louise McKinley, a former nurse who at 55 had decided to change careers and start her own business. Now the Harbor was the center of town life. "So," Della leaned across the table toward me, "Abbott is really selling. He's asking $320,000, but he's willing to budge. He already has an offer to transfer to Arizona." "How do you know?" "His sister works with my niece." Della took a sip of her coffee. "But that's not all. The apartment is better than we thought. 3 bedrooms, not 2, and a view of the mountains on both sides." I thought about it. 3 bedrooms was more than I needed. But then again, one room could be converted into a workshop. I wouldn't have to go down to the poorly lit basement anymore. "Do you think we should call his agent?" I asked. "Definitely. But don't delay. Opportunities like this don't last long." She was right. Even in our little town of Frostridge, real estate sold quickly, especially new apartments in Highland View, which was considered upscale by local standards. I'll call today, I decided. Thanks, Della. You're welcome. She smiled, revealing perfect false teeth. By the way, how was dinner last night? I sighed. The usual. Meredith was in her usual form. Proving again how successful she is and how unsuccessful you are. Something like that. When are you finally going to show them the papers for the apartment? I stirred my coffee, thinking about my answer. When the deal is closed. I don't want to speak too soon. I can just imagine the look on Meredith's face. Della chuckled. She always thought you were barely making ends meet. Let her think what she wants. You're too kind to her, Bea. If I were you, I would have put her in her place long ago. Maybe Della is right. Maybe I'd let my daughter talk down to me for too long. But I'd never been good at responding to harshness with harshness. Even in the worst days of my marriage to Malcolm, Quentin, and Meredith's father, I preferred to remain silent rather than shout back. At the lighthouse, I had learned to appreciate silence. During storms, when the wind threw rain against the windows with such force that it seemed as if the glass would shatter into 1,000 pieces, I sat by the fire and listened to the old chronometer ticking away. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Steady, reliable, even in the strongest storms. That same sound, the ticking of the clock, accompanied me every month as I counted my savings, first in a notebook, then in a special program on my computer. Interest, dividends, principal. I watched my investments grow with the same attention I once paid to checking the lenses of the lighthouse before nightfall. After coffee with Della, I decided not to go home right away. Instead, I went to Oliver Paxton's antique shop. I needed a special lubricant for a clock mechanism. Paxton's Lost Treasures was located on Frostridge's main street, in a Victorian building with stained glass windows. Despite its pretentious name, the shop did sometimes offer interesting finds. It was here that I found the 1860 Longines pocket watch that was now my pride and joy. The bell above the door rang melodiously as I entered. Oliver, a gray-haired man with a neat beard, looked up from the glass display case he was cleaning. "Beatrice," he smiled. "How's the work on the Civil War clock coming along?" "Slowly but surely. I need some special lubricant for the anchor escapement." "I have just the thing." He headed for a cabinet behind the counter. "Swiss, the best of its kind." While Oliver was looking for the lubricant, I wandered among the shelves, looking at the antique items. Silver teaspoons, porcelain figurines, mirrors, and carved frames tarnished by time. Each item had a history, was part of someone's life. "Here, I found it." Oliver returned with a small bottle. "The last one. I saved it especially for you." "Thank you," I said, taking out my wallet. "How much do I owe you?" $32, but for you, $25. We both knew it was a game. Oliver always quoted an inflated price and then gave a discount. I never haggled. That little trick was part of his enjoyment of selling. "By the way," he said, wrapping the bottle in paper, "I heard you're interested in apartments in Highland View?" I tensed. Had Della told someone else? "How did you know?" "It's a small town, Beatrice. Besides, my cousin works at the real estate agency that handles sales in the complex." I sighed. Of course. It was impossible to keep anything secret for long in Frostridge. "Yes, I'm thinking about moving," I admitted. "The house is getting too big for one person." "A wise decision." Oliver nodded. "If you need help appraising your antiques before you move, let me know." "I will." On the way home, I thought about how quickly news spread in a small town. If Oliver already knew about my plans, others would soon find out. It was only a matter of time before Meredith or Quentin heard. Maybe it was for the best. It would prepare the ground for when I showed them the apartment documents. When I got home, I went straight down to the workshop. The Civil War-era pocket watch was waiting for me on the workbench, disassembled and laid out neatly on black velvet cloth. Every spring, every wheel, every screw was in its place, marked and cleaned. Restoring a watch is not just a repair job. It is the art of restoring history. It is bringing back to life a mechanism that fell silent decades or even centuries ago. It requires patience, precision, and respect for the craftsmanship of its creators. I sat down at the workbench and put on my magnifying glasses. Time disappeared, leaving only my hands, tools, and the tiny parts of the mechanism. 4 hours later, I was torn from my concentration by the ringing of the phone. Meredith. "Hello," I answered, taking off my glasses. "Mom, why didn't you call back? I left 2 messages." I looked at the phone. Sure enough, 2 missed calls. "Sorry, I was working. I didn't hear the phone ring." "It's your watch again," she said, sounding annoyed. "Never mind, I need your help. Ezra is starting at his tattoo studio today, and Dexter and I are invited to a company party. Could you pick her up after work? Around 9 o'clock, I sighed. The Ink Needle studio was on the other side of town, a 30-minute drive. And at 9 o'clock in November, the roads could be slippery. Why can't she get home herself? She doesn't have a car, you know that. And the buses don't run at that time. What about a taxi? Mom! Meredith raised her voice. Are you seriously suggesting that I send an 18-year-old girl out alone in a taxi at night? Meredith, Ezra is an adult, and Frost Ridge is a safe town. I can't believe you're refusing to help your own granddaughter. I closed my eyes and counted to 5. I'm not refusing. I'm just asking if there are any other options. There are no other options, Meredith snapped. So are you going to pick her up, or do I have to cancel the party? Manipulation. Pure and simple. But I was too tired to argue. Fine, I'll pick up Ezra. Great, I'll text you the studio address, and don't be late. She finishes at 9 sharp. Meredith hung up without waiting for a response, as always. I put down my phone and returned to the clock. My concentration was broken, and I couldn't get back to work. Instead, my thoughts returned to the lighthouse. In 1987, when Meredith was 4 and Quentin was 7, they spent their first week with me at the lighthouse. Malcolm was away on a business trip, and the nanny was sick. I had to take the children with me. Quentin was thrilled. He could sit for hours on the observation deck, watching the ships through binoculars. He helped me check the diesel generator and even kept a logbook, recording the weather conditions and the time of passing ships in his clumsy, childish handwriting. Meredith, on the other hand, was bored and moody. She didn't like the lack of a TV, the spiral staircase, or the sound of the sea at night. It's scary and boring here, she complained. Why can't you work somewhere normal like other moms? By the end of the week, she refused to go up to the observation deck and locked herself in her bedroom with her books. When Malcolm came to pick up the children, she rushed to him, crying, "Daddy, take me away from here. I never want to come back to this awful lighthouse." At the time, I thought it was just childish whims. But as the years passed, Meredith's attitude toward my work didn't change. She was ashamed that her mother was a lighthouse keeper. When her classmates came to our house, she never mentioned my profession. And if anyone asked her directly, she would respond evasively. My mom works on the coast. Quentin was different. He was proud of the lighthouse and often took his friends on tours. In high school, he even wrote a research paper on the history of New England lighthouses, which received top marks. But then he met Vanity, and everything changed. She never hid her opinion that being a lighthouse keeper was old-fashioned and a waste of potential. The phone rang again, interrupting my memories. This time it was Quentin. "Hi, Mom." His voice sounded uncertain. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Quentin. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing. It's just... Meredith said you left upset yesterday." I smiled involuntarily. Quentin had always been the peacemaker in the family. I wasn't upset, just tired. "You know she didn't mean any harm. She just has a blunt personality." "I know," I lied. Meredith knew exactly what she was doing when she put me down. "Anyway, I wanted to ask, is it true that you're thinking about buying an apartment?" I froze. So the rumors had reached him. "Who told you?" "Just some people I know. Frost Ridge is a small town." "I'm looking into options," I replied cautiously. "The house is getting too big for me." "But Mom," he faltered, "are you sure it's a good idea? At your age, such a big change." "At my age?" I couldn't hide my irritation. "Quentin, I'm 67, not 97. That's not what I meant. It's just, you've lived in that house your whole life. And apartments are so expensive these days. Are you sure you can afford a mortgage on your pension?" So that's it. Like Meredith, he thinks I'm barely making ends meet. "I'll take care of the financial side," I replied dryly. Don't worry. Vanity and I can help if you need it. Or you could move in with us. We have a spare room. The prospect of living under the same roof as Vanity was worse than returning to the lighthouse during the worst storm. Thanks, but I'll manage on my own. Okay, he said, clearly disappointed by my refusal. Just know that we're always here if you need anything. After talking to Quentin, I decided to call my real estate agent. If rumors were already spreading, it was best to act quickly. Carol Jenkins, a real estate agent at Frostridge Homes, answered after the second ring. "Mrs. Merlo, I was just about to call you." Her voice sounded excited. "There's another potential buyer for the Abbott apartment. If you're still interested, we need to move quickly." "I'm interested," I said firmly. "When can we meet to sign the papers? Would tomorrow at 10 a.m. work for you?" "More than happy." "Great. I'll get all the necessary paperwork ready." "And Mrs. Merlo, are you sure you want full payment right away? Usually people take out a mortgage." "I'm sure." After talking to Carol, I felt a strange sense of relief. The decision had been made, and there was no turning back. Tomorrow, I would take the first step toward a new life, a life in which I would no longer be invisible to my own children. That evening, as promised, I went to pick up Ezra from Inkneedle. The studio was located in a former warehouse converted into a hipster space with brick walls and industrial lighting. When I walked in, Ezra was cleaning his workstation. When she saw me, she lit up. "Grandma, you came." "Of course I did. I promised." "Mom said you might not come." Ezra rolled her eyes. She's exaggerating as usual. "How was your first day?" "Awesome!" She immediately covered her mouth with her hand. "Sorry." "Very well. I was entrusted with a simple tattoo under Jaden's supervision." She nodded toward the bearded man with tattooed hands who was washing the tools. "How did it turn out?" The client was satisfied. It was a small star on her wrist, nothing complicated, but I did a good job for my first time. "I'm proud of you," I said sincerely. On the way home, Ezra talked nonstop about the studio, her colleagues, and her plans for the future. I listened and thought about how much she resembled Quentin at her age, just as enthusiastic, sincere, and open to new experiences. "Grandma, is it true that you're buying an apartment?" she asked suddenly. I sighed. It seemed like the whole town already knew. "Yes, it's true." "Cool, where?" "In Highland View." Ezra whistled. "Wow, that's the trendiest place in town. But isn't it expensive?" "I can afford it," I replied calmly. "Mom says you're barely making ends meet." "Your mom doesn't know much about me." Ezra looked at me with interest. "You're full of surprises, Grandma. I always suspected that." We pulled up to Meredith's house. The lights were on in all the windows, even though it was almost 10 o'clock. "Thanks for the ride." Ezra leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. "Would you like to come in for tea?" "No, sweetie, it's late. Besides, I'm not sure your mom will be happy to see me." "Is she still mad about yesterday?" "Probably." "Don't worry about it. You know how she is." I knew her too well. The next few days were spent running errands, meeting with the real estate agent, signing documents, agreeing on a moving date. Everything was going smoothly until Thursday, when it was time for another family dinner. I thought about declining, saying I was busy or not feeling well, but I decided to go. It might be the last time before everything changed. This time, dinner was at Quentin and Vanity's place. Their house was smaller than Meredith and Dexter's, but cozier. No pretensions of luxury, with slightly worn furniture and family photos on the walls. "Mom, I'm so glad you're here." Quentin greeted me at the door with a hug. "Come on in, everyone's in the living room." Everyone meant Meredith, Dexter, and Fletcher. Ezra wasn't there. She was working at the studio. "Beatrice," Meredith nodded at me in greeting, "are you wearing that old sweater again?" I looked down at my deep blue cashmere sweater. It wasn't new. I'd bought it 5 years ago. But it was warm, comfortable, and well-preserved. "I like it," I replied simply. "Of course," Meredith rolled her eyes. "You like everything old and worn out." I ignored the sarcasm and said hello to the others. Dinner started off relatively calmly. Vanity had made beef roast with vegetables, and it was really delicious. The conversation revolved around Dexter's work, the latest news from Frostridge, and Fletcher's college plans. I ate silently, only responding when spoken to directly. Everything changed when Vanity brought out dessert. apple pie from the supermarket. By the way, Mom, Meredith turned to me as she cut herself a slice, we heard some interesting news. I tensed up inside, but remained calm on the outside. What news? They say you're buying an apartment in Highland View. Is that true? All eyes turned to me. Dexter even stopped chewing. Yes, it's true, I said, taking a sip of tea from my cup. And how are you going to pay for it? Meredith leaned forward, unable to hide her skepticism. That's the most expensive complex in town. I have savings. Meredith laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Savings? From your salary, Mom, you need at least $60,000 for the down payment. I know, I replied calmly. And where are you going to get that kind of money? Her voice took on an accusatory tone. Are you selling the house? No, I'm keeping the house. Meredith exchanged glances with Dexter, who cleared his throat and joined the conversation. Beatrice, buying real estate is a serious decision, especially at your age. Are you sure you've thought it through? Absolutely, I said. Still, Meredith persisted, where did you get the money? Did you take out a loan? Did you mortgage the house? Neither. I'm paying the full price. No mortgage. A shocked silence hung over the table. Even Fletcher looked up from his phone and stared at me. That's impossible, Meredith finally said. The full price of an apartment in Highland View is over $300,000. $320,000 to be exact, I confirmed, but I managed to negotiate it down to $305,000. Mom, Quentin looked concerned. Where did you get that kind of money? I saved it for many years. From your salary as a lighthouse keeper? Meredith didn't hide her sarcasm. And how much did you save? $10 a month? I started with $50, then more, plus investments. Investments? Meredith laughed. You in stocks? Mom, you don't even know how to use online banking. I have a financial advisor. I began to lose my patience. And I know how to use online banking perfectly well. Just because I prefer paper statements doesn't mean I'm not tech savvy. And you're telling me you saved $300,000 from your salary? Dexter clearly didn't believe her. Not just from my salary. I had additional income. Watch restoration and inheritance from my parents, the sale of a house in Portland. A house in Portland? Meredith raised her eyebrows. What house? My parents' house. I sold it after my mother died. When was that? 15 years ago. And you didn't tell us? Meredith's indignation knew no bounds. Nothing about the inheritance or selling the house? Should I have? I asked quietly. Of course you should have. We're your children. My adult children who have their own lives, their own finances, and who have never been interested in my affairs unless it directly concerned them. Silence fell again at the table. Quentin stared at his plate, Vanity at Meredith, Fletcher at his phone. Only Dexter tried to maintain a businesslike appearance, although it was clear from his expression that he was mentally calculating the amount of money being discussed. When are you planning to move? Quentin finally asked. In a month. I need to take care of some formalities and get the apartment ready. Do you need help moving? He offered. I can take a day off. Thanks, but I'll hire a crew. I don't want to burden anyone. You're not a burden, Mom. Wait, Meredith interrupted. I still can't believe it. All these years you pretended you were barely making ends meet and you were saving money? I never pretended to be poor, I argued. That's what you always thought. Because you live in an old house, wear clothes that are 10 years old, and skimp on everything. I live the way I want to, and I'm frugal because I don't like to waste money. And in all these years, you never once thought to help your children? Meredith's voice was filled with unmasked accusation. When Dexter and I bought our house, we had to take out a huge mortgage, and you sat on a pile of money and said nothing. I took a deep breath before answering. I helped you with the down payment on your house. And Quentin's too. What? Meredith looked stunned. When? 20 years ago, when you and Dexter bought your first house. $15,000 in an anonymous transfer and $12,000 to Quentin and Vanity. It was you? Quentin stared at me. We thought it was Vanity's parents. My parents would never have given us that kind of money, Vanity objected, joining the conversation for the first time. They were barely making ends meet themselves. Why didn't you tell us? Meredith was still reeling. Why did you do it anonymously? Because I didn't want you to feel obligated, I replied honestly, or worse, that you'd think you could continue to rely on my help. So you didn't trust us? Meredith crossed her arms over her chest. You thought we'd beg you for money? Isn't that what you're doing right now? I asked quietly. Are you accusing me of not giving you my savings? Meredith flushed with anger. That's not what I meant. It's just parents usually help their children, especially if they can afford it. I helped. Twice. And now, I want to provide for my own old age so I won't be a burden to you. You'd never be a burden, Mom, Quentin interjected. We'd always take care of you. Really? I looked him in the eyes. How? Put me in the guest room or pay for a nursing home? We'd figure something out, he replied uncertainly. Exactly. Something. And I prefer to decide for myself where and how I want to live in my old age. God, Mom. Meredith rolled her eyes. You always dramatize everything. No one was going to send you to a nursing home. No? What were you talking about last Christmas when you thought I was in the kitchen? I glanced at Dexter, who had suddenly become very interested in the contents of his cup. We'll have to find a nice place for her when she gets too frail. I think that's what you said, Dexter? An awkward silence hung over the table. Dexter blushed. Meredith turned pale. You misunderstood, she finally said. We were just discussing options. I understand perfectly well, Meredith, and I don't judge you. You have your own life, your own plans, and so do I. Mom. Quentin looked genuinely upset. We love you. We would never abandon you. I know you love me, Quentin. I smiled gently at my son. But love and practical matters are different things. Still, Meredith persisted, it's strange that you kept your finances from us for so many years. I feel betrayed. It was my money, Meredith. I don't have to account for every dollar to my own children. Not every dollar, but you could have mentioned $300,000. I put down my fork and napkin. My appetite was completely gone. I see it differently. I saved and invested for many years. It was my choice, my strategy, and I didn't have to report to anyone. Of course you didn't, Meredith replied coldly. You don't owe us anything. It turns out that we're the ones who have to invite you to dinner, call you, and take an interest in your life. And you can keep us in the dark about important decisions. Meredith, Quentin tried to calm her down. Mom's right. It's her money, her decisions. How can you not understand? Meredith raised her voice. It's not about the money. It's about trust, about openness. We're a family, and she treated us like strangers. And how did you treat me? I asked quietly. When was the last time any of you asked me how I was doing? Not just out of politeness, but because you genuinely cared? When did you call me just to talk, not to ask for something? When did you invite me over for dinner? Not for a formal family gathering, but just because you missed me? The questions hung in the air. No one answered. Exactly, I said, getting up from the table. Thanks for dinner, Quentin, Vanity. It was delicious. Now, if you don't mind, I think I'll go home. It's getting late. Mom, please stay, Quentin said, also getting up. Let's talk about this calmly. There's nothing to discuss, Quentin. I've made my decision about buying the apartment. You know that. End of story. You always do this. Meredith also jumped up. You leave when the conversation gets uncomfortable. I turned to her, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me, a rare emotion for me. No, Meredith. I usually keep quiet and put up with it. I put up with your constant criticism, your contempt, your disrespectful comments. I've put up with it for years. But today, I'm just tired and I want to go home. You're playing the victim again, Meredith almost shouted. That's all you've ever done in your life. Poor, miserable lighthouse keeper whom no one appreciates. You know what? You're not appreciated because you've achieved nothing in your life. Meredith, Quentin exclaimed. No, let her hear me. Meredith couldn't stop herself. You're no role model for me, Mom. You've achieved nothing. You've spent your whole life on this damn lighthouse, and now you're fiddling with old clocks in the basement. You have no career, no achievements, nothing. And now it turns out you've saved up a pile of money, sitting on it like Scrooge McDuck, and you're going to spend it on an apartment you don't even need. I looked at my daughter, and something inside me snapped. All my life I had tried to be a good mother. I worked at the lighthouse, provided for my family after Malcolm left, help my children when they needed it. And this is how she sees me, a failure with no achievements. I understand you, Meredith, I said, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. Thank you for your honesty. With that, I left the dining room, leaving behind a stunned silence. For 3 days after that dinner, my phone was silent. Neither Meredith nor Quentin tried to contact me. I went about my business, finishing the restoration of a pocket watch, meeting with a real estate agent, having coffee with Della. I tried not to think about what had happened, although Meredith's words echoed in my head. You're no role model for me. You've achieved nothing. On the 4th day, as I was tending to the roses in the garden, cutting back the wilted stems before winter, I received a message from Ezra. Grandma, can I stop by tonight? I want to show you some new sketches. I smiled. My granddaughter had always been straightforward and never hid her feelings. If she wanted to see me, it meant she really wanted to, not that she was doing someone else's bidding. Of course, come on over. I've got blueberry pie. Ezra showed up at 7 in the evening with a backpack full of sketchbooks and a bag from the supermarket. I brought ice cream for the pie, she said, handing me the bag. I know you like vanilla. Thanks, sweetie. Come on in, I just took the pie out of the oven. We settled down in the kitchen. While I poured the tea, Ezra leafed through her sketchbook. Here, look. She opened the page with an intricate compass, surrounded by ocean waves. I did it yesterday for a client, a sailor returning from his last voyage before retirement. That's beautiful, I said, looking closely at the details. The compass needle pointed north, and constellations were depicted around it. You captured the texture of the waves perfectly. Thank you, Ezra beamed. I was inspired by your stories about the lighthouse and the sea. Speaking of lighthouses. She turned the page, and I saw a sketch of the Port Haven lighthouse, a silhouette on a cliff, illuminated by a beam of light in the darkness. This is for you. I mean, if you ever want a tattoo. I laughed. At my age, start with tattoos? I'm not sure that's a good idea. Age has nothing to do with it, Ezra shrugged. There was a woman in the studio last week who was 78 years old. She got a tattoo with the names of all her grandchildren. I think I'll pass, though, but it's a beautiful design, thank you. We ate pie and ice cream, and Ezra told me about the studio, her clients, and her colleagues. I could see she was nervous. She was tapping her foot under the table and glancing at me from time to time. Finally, she made up her mind. Grandma, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Is it true that you've been saving money all these years and haven't told anyone? I put down my fork. Yes. And did you really help Mom and Dad with the down payments on their houses? Yes. Why anonymously? I sighed. You know, sometimes help that no one knows about is the purest kind. No obligations, no awkwardness, no expectations. Ezra thought about it, twirling a purple strand of hair around her finger. Mom is furious. She says you've been deceiving them their whole lives. I didn't deceive anyone. I just didn't share information that didn't concern them. I think that's cool, Ezra smiled. You're like a ninja. Quiet, invisible, but in control. I laughed. I'm not sure about ninja, but thanks for the compliment. Listen, Ezra leaned across the table toward me. If you need help moving or anything else, I'm here for you. I have Wednesday and Thursday off. Thanks, sweetie. I'll hire people for the heavy lifting, but your help with the little things would be great. No problem, she beamed. I can help you pack, organize. Can I stay at your new place sometimes, like overnight, when my mom's giving me a hard time or when I need some alone time? Sure, I smiled. I'll have a separate guest room or a workshop. I haven't decided yet. Do both. I mean, you can combine the two. We talked late into the night. For the first time in a long time, I felt a real connection with someone in my family. Ezra was genuinely interested in my life, my plans, my past. She asked questions about the lighthouse, the clock, how I learned to invest. I even told her the story about rescuing fishermen during a storm, a story I had never told Meredith because I knew she wouldn't be interested. When Ezra was ready to leave, she hugged me tighter than usual. You know, Grandma, you're the coolest person I know, and it doesn't matter what Mom says. You've accomplished so much. I felt a lump in my throat. Those simple words meant more to me than all the formal praise I had ever received. Thank you, Ezra. That means a lot to me. After my granddaughter left, I sat on the porch for a long time, looking at the stars and thinking about how strange life is. Sometimes the people closest to you remain strangers, and sometimes you find understanding where you least expect it. The next morning, as I was making coffee, the phone rang. It was Meredith. I took a deep breath before answering. "Good morning, Meredith." "Mom?" Her voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. "How are you?" "I'm fine, thank you. How are you?" "Great. Listen, I was thinking, maybe you'd like to come over for dinner tonight. Just you and me, no Dexter. He's out of town on a business trip." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. Meredith had never invited me to dinner without a special occasion before. Why the sudden attention? "What? I can't invite my own mother to dinner?" "Of course you can. It's just not like you." There was a pause, then Meredith sighed. "Okay, Mom. I wanted to apologize for what I said at Quentin's dinner. I was wrong." Now I was definitely surprised. Meredith never apologized. At least, not to me. "That's unexpected." "Yes, I know I can be harsh. It just hurt that you kept such important information from us for so many years." "I understand. So, will you come to dinner? 7? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse. Her words were still too fresh in my mind. But another part, the part that had always hoped for a reconciliation, won out. "Okay, I'll be there." "Great." She sounded unnaturally cheerful again. "See you tonight." All day long, I couldn't shake the strange feeling. Something about this sudden invitation seemed fake. The mood swing was too abrupt, the friendliness too contrived. I decided to talk to Della. She always had a knack for seeing through people. "Of course she's up to something," Della said emphatically when we met at the harbor for lunch. "Meredith would never invite you over just like that for no reason. Maybe she really wants to apologize?" I was still hoping for the best. "B, you're not a naive girl." Della shook her head. "She found out about your money, and now she's trying to find out how much you really have and if she can get some of it. Not everyone is as selfish as you think. Most are, especially when it comes to money." Della took a sip of her coffee. "But go, of course. Just keep your ears open." I didn't argue, but Della's words made me think. What if she was right? What if Meredith was only interested in my money and not our relationship? At 7 o'clock, I pulled up to Meredith's house. The lights were dim in the living room and soft music was playing. Jazz, which I loved. Meredith greeted me at the door, dressed not in her usual business suit, but in a simple dress. She even hugged me, awkwardly but sincerely. "Come in, Mom. I made your favorite lasagna." Indeed, the aroma of tomatoes and basil wafted from the kitchen. I couldn't remember the last time Meredith had cooked something herself instead of ordering food from a restaurant. "It smells delicious," I said, following her into the dining room. The table was set for 2, with wine glasses and candles. It looked like an expensive restaurant. "You went to a lot of trouble," I remarked, sitting down in the seat she offered me. "I wanted to create a special atmosphere," Meredith smiled, pouring wine into the glasses. "To make up?" I raised my glass but didn't rush to drink. Something about the situation still felt wrong. "So," Meredith began after a few sips of wine, "tell me more about your plans. When exactly are you moving? What kind of place is it? 3 bedrooms? "Yes, 3 bedrooms, I replied. "I'm moving in 3 weeks. The deal is almost done." "That's wonderful. How do you plan to furnish it? Are you taking furniture from your house or buying new?" Some of it I'll have to buy. Old furniture doesn't always fit in new spaces." Of course. Meredith nodded energetically. "You know, I could help you choose." "I have good taste, and I know an excellent interior designer." "Thanks, but I'll be fine. I have my own ideas about how I want my apartment to look." "Of course," she paused. "What are you planning to do with the house?" There it was, the real reason for dinner. I'll keep that to myself for now. "Maybe rent it out." "Rent it out?" Meredith frowned. "But that's so much hassle. Tenants, repairs, bills. You don't need that kind of stress at your age." "I haven't decided yet." "Maybe you should sell it." She tried to sound casual, but I could tell that was the main question of the evening. "Real estate prices are good right now. You could get a decent amount for it." "Maybe," I replied evasively. Time will tell. Meredith leaned forward. If you decide to sell, I can help. Dexter knows an excellent real estate agent who specializes in houses like yours. I'll keep that in mind, thank you. The rest of the dinner went on in a similar vein. Meredith asked about my finances, my plans for the future, what I was going to do with the money. It was all presented as concern, but I could hear the real questions beneath the surface. How much money do you really have? What can I get out of this? When I was about to leave, Meredith hugged me again. Let's see each other more often, Mom. I miss our conversations. What conversations? I wanted to ask. We never really talked, but I just nodded. Sure, Meredith. At home, I couldn't sleep for a long time thinking about the evening. Della was right. Meredith was only interested in money. Not me, not our relationship, but the opportunity to get something material. It was painful to realize, but at the same time sobering. At least now I knew exactly where we stood. In the morning, I was awakened by the phone ringing. It was Quentin. Mom, did I wake you up? Not anymore. I looked at the clock. 7:30. Is something wrong? No, everything's fine. Just wanted to see how you were doing, and maybe you'd like to come over for lunch on Sunday? Vanity's making roast beef. I sighed. Now Quentin, too. Quentin, you're not just calling for no reason, are you? There was a pause. What do you mean? Meredith already had me over for dinner and the interrogation. Now it's your turn? Mom! He sounded genuinely hurt. I just wanted to see you. We didn't really talk after that dinner. What do you want to talk about? Well, everything. Your plans, the move. Maybe you need help? Thanks, but I've got everything sorted. Okay. He sounded disappointed. But come over for lunch anyway. No talk about money, I promise. I agreed, but without much enthusiasm. The next few days turned into a constant stream of calls and messages from Meredith. She called every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times, offering to help, asking about my plans, inviting me to dinner or lunch. Every conversation somehow came back to money, real estate, or my future will. Ezra noticed the change in her mother's behavior. She's getting weird, Grandma, my granddaughter said when we met on Saturday to start packing my things. She keeps talking about you, about how you should spend more time together. Yesterday, she even got out the old photo albums and showed Fletcher pictures of you at the lighthouse. Really? I raised my eyebrows in surprise. The same pictures she used to call boring pictures from work? Yeah, those ones, Ezra rolled her eyes. And now she's suddenly proud that her mom worked at a lighthouse. She tells everyone what an important and responsible job it was. I shook my head. It's amazing how people can change when they find out someone has money. It's not just about the money. Ezra shrugged, carefully wrapping a porcelain figurine in paper. She's afraid you'll drift away completely. I heard her tell Dad that you might cut them out of your will. I don't even have a will, I sighed, although maybe it's time to write one. And you'll really cut them out? Ezra looked at me curiously. No, of course not. They're my children, no matter what. Will you include me? She winked. Of course. You'll get all my watches. Cool. I'll make an installation out of them. I'll hang it in my studio. We laughed, and the tension of the last few days eased a little. It was always easy with Ezra. She didn't pretend, she didn't manipulate, she was just herself. On Sunday, I went to lunch with Quentin and Vanity. As my son had promised, there was no talk of money, at least not directly. But I noticed how Vanity looked appraisingly at my bag, leather, expensive, bought 10 years ago, at my watch, a vintage Omega, a gift from a colleague at the lighthouse for my 30th anniversary, at my cashmere coat. It was as if she was trying to calculate my net worth based on outward appearances. After lunch, Quentin took me aside. Mom, I wanted to ask, have you thought about helping Fletcher with college? He really wants to study computer science, but good programs are expensive. I looked at my son sadly. Quentin, you promised, no talk about money. It's not about money, he blushed. It's about Fletcher's future, about family. If Fletcher comes to me himself and tells me about his plans, I'll think about how I can help, but I'm not going to discuss it through a third party. Quentin looked disappointed but nodded. I understand. I'm sorry. When I left, he hugged me tighter than usual. We really love you, Mom, regardless of money. I wanted to believe him. I really did. On Monday, a new surprise awaited me, a call from Dexter. "Beatrice, how are you?" His voice sounded overly cheerful. "I'm fine, thank you, Dexter. To what do I owe the honor?" "Come on, do I need a reason to ask how my mother-in-law is doing?" He laughed nervously. "Actually, I have a business proposal for you. I recently started working with a financial company that specializes in investments for seniors. Excellent terms, good returns, complete security." "Dexter," I interrupted him, "I'm not interested in new investments. I have a financial advisor I trust." "But you haven't even heard the proposal." There was a note of desperation in his voice. "We're talking about a guaranteed return of 15% per year." "Nothing guarantees 15% a year, Dexter. It's either excessive risk or fraud." "But Beatrice—" "Goodbye, Dexter. Say hello to Meredith." I hung up, feeling a mixture of disappointment and exhaustion. Now even my brother-in-law was trying to get his hands on my money. The week continued in the same vein. Meredith called every day. Quentin every other day. Dexter sent brochures with financial offers. Even Vanity sent me a message inviting me to a girls' night out, the first time she'd ever done that in all the years we'd known each other. Only Ezra remained the same. She came by after work, helped me pack, and told me about her clients and her sketches. She didn't ask about money or try to find out what I was planning to do with the house or apartment. She was just there when I needed her and gave me space when I wanted to be alone. On Thursday, exactly 2 weeks after the memorable dinner at Quentin's, Meredith called with a new proposal. "Mom, I have an idea. Let me help you move, and then we'll have a housewarming party. We'll invite the whole family, friends, neighbors. We'll show everyone your new apartment." "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied. "I'd prefer a quiet move, without any fuss." "But Mom, this is an important event. It needs to be celebrated." "Meredith," I took a deep breath. "Let's be honest. 2 weeks ago, you said I had achieved nothing in my life. And now you suddenly want to throw a party in my honor. What has changed?" There was a pause. "I was wrong," she finally said. "You've achieved a lot, and I'm proud of you." "Really? Or are you just interested in my money?" "Mom, how can you say that?" "Because it's true, Meredith. Ever since you found out about my savings, you've been calling every day. Dexter is trying to get me involved in some shady investment. Quentin is asking for money for Fletcher's college. Even Vanity has suddenly decided to be friends with me. What am I supposed to think?" "You're being unfair." Meredith's voice trembled. "We just want to mend our relationship. After 20 years of neglect? Why now?" "Because we realized we were wrong," she almost shouted. "Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes, it is," I replied quietly, "especially when every conversation somehow comes down to money or property." Meredith sniffed. "You always think the worst of people." "No, Meredith. I just stopped turning a blind eye to the obvious." After that conversation, Meredith's calls became less frequent, but they didn't stop altogether. Now she was more cautious. She didn't mention money directly. She asked more about my health, about my watch, even about the lighthouse. But I could sense the insincerity in every word. 3 days before the move, Ezra came to me with an unexpected proposal. "Grandma, why don't I move in with you? I'll help you with the apartment and the workshop. I need to move out of my parents' place anyway, and renting is expensive." I looked closely at my granddaughter. "Ezra, are you sure this is what you want? Meredith didn't ask you to do this?" "What? No." She looked genuinely surprised. "What makes you think that?" "I'm just checking. I've been getting a lot of unexpected offers from relatives lately." "I understand." Ezra nodded. "But I really want to live away from my parents. My mom is always meddling in my life, controlling my every move. But with you, I feel like an adult. You respect my decisions, even if you don't agree with them." I thought about it. The idea was tempting. The new apartment had enough room for 2, and Ezra's presence would brighten my days. Besides, she really needed space to grow and become independent. "Okay," I decided. "You can move in, but on one condition." "What's that?" "You'll pay a symbolic rent. It'll be very small but regular, so you'll feel responsible and independent." Ezra beamed. "Deal. I'll be the best neighbor ever, I promise." When Meredith found out about Ezra's decision, she immediately called me. "Mom, are you out of your mind? Letting an 18-year-old girl live away from her parents." "She won't be living alone, she'll be living with me," I replied calmly. "She's an adult. She's completely irresponsible. And that job at the tattoo parlor, you realize you're encouraging her rebelliousness, don't you?" "I'm encouraging her independence and respecting her choice. You should try it sometime." "What do you mean by that?" Meredith's voice was indignant. "Just what I said. Ezra is a talented, intelligent girl. She deserves a chance to prove herself." "She's manipulating you. She's grooming you so she can get access to your money." I couldn't help laughing. "Seriously, Meredith? Are you describing your daughter or yourself?" "How dare you!" she almost shouted. "I'm calling because I'm worried about you and her." "No, you're calling because you're afraid of losing control over her and over me." "You'll regret this, Mom. She's using you." "We'll see. In the meantime, I'd like to end this conversation. I have a lot to do before the move." After that conversation, Meredith didn't call for 2 days, the longest break since I revealed my secret. But Quentin called. "Mom, are you sure you want to live with Ezra? She's just a kid." "She's 18, Quentin." I was working and living on my own at her age. Times were different. People are the same. Ezra will be fine, and I'll be there if she needs help. "Meredith is furious," he sighed. "She says you're turning Ezra against her." "I'm not turning anyone against anyone. I just respect Ezra's right to make his own decisions." "I know, Mom. Just be careful. Meredith isn't the type to back down easily." His words proved prophetic. The next day, the day before the move, Meredith showed up at my door unannounced. Her face was red with anger. "We need to talk," she said, walking into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "Come in, of course," I said sarcastically, closing the door. "This has gone too far," Meredith turned to me. "First you hide your money from us, then you accuse us of being greedy, and now you're taking my daughter away." "I'm not taking anyone away. Ezra made her own decision." "After you brainwashed her," Meredith almost shouted. "What did you promise her? Money, your inheritance?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Meredith, listen to yourself. You're talking as if money is the only thing that matters." "For you, yes. You've been saving it for years, hiding it from your own children." "I saved it for myself, to ensure my independence and not be a burden to you in your old age." "A burden?" Meredith threw her hands up. "We would never consider you a burden. You're our mother." "Really? What about last Christmas when you talked about a nice place?" Meredith blushed even more. "That was just talk, hypothetical. Just like my hypothetical plans for my own money. That's different." "Why? Because it's about you?" Meredith sank down on the sofa, suddenly losing all her enthusiasm. "You've always been like this. Cold, calculating, thinking only of yourself." I sat down opposite her. "Really? I raised you on my own after your father left. I worked at the lighthouse so you'd have a roof over your heads and food on the table. I helped with the down payments on your houses. Is that what you call only thinking about yourself? You never showed us you loved us," Meredith said quietly. "You were always so reserved, as if we were just a chore." I felt something tighten in my chest. Had she really perceived my attitude that way all these years? "I loved you, Meredith, and I still do. But love doesn't mean dissolving into your children, giving up your own life." "Then why do you let Ezra live with you, but never offered us the same?" "Because Ezra asked me to, and because she really needs it, space to find herself, just like I did once." Meredith was silent, staring at the floor. "I've always envied Quentin," she finally said. "You loved him more." "That's not true," I said firmly. "I loved you both the same. You're just different. Quentin accepted my love for what it was. You always wanted something else, something I couldn't give you." "What? Tenderness? Support? Approval?" "I supported you, Meredith. Always. But you never noticed because I didn't express my support the way you expected me to." We sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. Rain began to fall outside, the drops drumming on the window, creating a cozy background noise. "You know," Meredith finally said, "when Dexter and I bought our first house and all this money suddenly came in, I was sure it was from his parents. He was too. We even had a fight because I thought he was hiding his family's wealth from me. She smiled faintly. But it was you. Yes. Why anonymously? Why didn't you say it was from you? I paused, searching for the right words. Probably because I was afraid of your reaction. I was afraid you'd see it as an attempt to control your life, or that you'd refuse out of pride. Maybe that would have been the case, she sighed. I've always been stubborn. That's not stubbornness. That's strength of character. You got that from me. Meredith looked up, surprised by my words. You think I'm strong? Of course. You've always known what you want and gone after it. You started a family, built a career. I'm proud of you, Meredith, even if I don't always show it. Her eyes filled with tears. You've never said that before. You never asked. We fell silent again. The rain intensified, turning into a downpour. I got up to turn on the light. The room had grown dark. So you're really going to let Ezra live with you? Meredith asked, wiping her eyes. Yes, I think it will be good for both of us. She needs space to grow, and I need company. She's been really rebellious lately. She doesn't listen to me, she talks back. Maybe you should ease up on her a little. She's not a child anymore. I just want what's best for her. Meredith shook her head. That tattoo work of hers, what kind of future does that offer her? Not a bad one, actually. Good tattoo artists make decent money. Plus, she's talented. Do you really think so? Of course. Have you seen her drawings? Just a glimpse. All kinds of strange patterns and symbols. They're not just patterns, they're art. She has a unique view of the world. Meredith thought for a moment. You know, she showed me a sketch of a lighthouse. She said she did it for you. Yes, it's very beautiful. She said she was inspired by your stories about Port Haven. Meredith looked at me curiously. Did you tell her a lot about the lighthouse? Enough. She loves hearing stories about that time. You never told me. Only Quentin. You never showed any interest, Meredith. On the contrary, you always made it clear that you were ashamed of my work. I was a silly girl, she sighed. I thought being a lighthouse keeper was old-fashioned and unprestigious. I wanted my mother to be, I don't know, a lawyer or a doctor. Someone I could brag about to my friends. And now? Now I realize it was an important and responsible job, and that you needed support, not criticism. I wanted to believe she meant it. I wanted to think that Meredith's sudden interest in my life wasn't just about getting a piece of my money, but years of disappointment had taught me to be cautious. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot to me. Mom, Meredith looked uncertain. I know I've been terrible lately. The phone calls, asking about money. You're right, I was thinking about what I could get, and I'm ashamed of that. I appreciate your honesty. Will you give me another chance? A chance to really fix our relationship? Without any talk of money or inheritance? I looked at my daughter for a long time, trying to see the real motives behind her words. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. After all, this was what I had dreamed of for so many years. But another part of me, more cynical, hardened by experience, had doubts. Let's give it a try, I finally said. One day at a time. No expectations, no promises. Meredith nodded, and I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a very long time, a glimmer of hope and perhaps genuine affection. We agreed to meet in a week, after I had moved and settled into my new place. When Meredith left, the rain had stopped, and the setting sun peeked through the clouds. I stood on the porch watching her car drive away, thinking about the strange twists and turns of fate. It took $300,000 for my daughter to finally see me as a person, not just her mother. Cynical? Perhaps. But maybe this is the beginning of something new, something real. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a message from Ezra. Everything's ready for the move, Grandma. See you tomorrow at 8. Can't wait for our new life. I smiled. Whatever happened to Meredith, I had Ezra. Sincere, spontaneous, real. And that was a lot. The morning of the move was clear and frosty, a typical November day in Frostridge. Frost covered the grass and rooftops, transforming the ordinary landscape into something magical. I got up early, before dawn, and made myself one last cup of coffee in the old kitchen. The house that had been my home for over 40 years seemed quiet, as if it too was preparing for change. At exactly 8 o'clock, a van pulled up with movers. Ezra appeared behind it, carrying a backpack and a box. "Grandma, are you ready?" She was beaming with excitement. "Almost," I smiled. "I just need to check that I haven't forgotten anything important." "I'll help." Ezra put the box on the porch and ran into the house. "Wow, it's so empty without your clocks." Indeed, the walls where dozens of clocks had once hung, from miniature pocket watches to impressive grandfather clocks, were now bare. Most of my treasures had already been carefully packed and were waiting in boxes. "It's strange to see the house like this," I admitted. "It's as if part of its soul is gone." "But now it will be in your new apartment." Ezra hugged me around the shoulders. "And I'll be there, isn't that great?" "It's great." I squeezed her hand. The move took about 3 hours. The movers worked quickly and carefully, but I was still nervous when they carried out the boxes with my watches. Some of the mechanisms were so fragile that the slightest jolt could damage them. "Be careful with that, please," I repeated for the 10th time as they lifted my workbench. "Mom, you're driving them crazy with your instructions," Meredith's voice rang out. I turned and saw my daughter standing at the gate. She was wearing an elegant cashmere coat and low-heeled shoes, clearly not for housework. "Meredith, what are you doing here?" "I came to help, of course," she said, coming closer. "We agreed to try again, remember?" "I remember, but I wasn't expecting you today." "I wanted to surprise you," she said with an awkward smile. "Bad idea?" I looked at my daughter more closely. There was uncertainty in her eyes, a rare emotion for her. "No, it's not a bad idea, just unexpected." "Mom," Ezra came out of the house with the last box. "I thought you weren't coming." "And miss such an important event?" Meredith smiled tensely. "Never." Ezra raised an eyebrow skeptically, but said nothing. I could see she was uncomfortable. She and Meredith had probably argued about her decision to live with me. "Since you're here, maybe you can help me check if we left anything in the house," I suggested to Meredith. "Ezra will take the kitchen, I'll do the bedroom, and you can check the living room and basement." "Sure," Meredith said, taking off her coat and hanging it on the porch railing. While the movers finished loading the truck, the three of us went through the house. I found a forgotten jewelry box under the bed, and Ezra found some kitchen towels in a back drawer. Meredith came up from the basement with a dusty box. "Mom, what's this?" She set the box on the kitchen table. "I found it behind the old wardrobe." I opened the lid and felt my breath catch. Inside were children's drawings, school notebooks, homemade cards, everything my children had created with their own hands many years ago. "I forgot about this box," I said quietly, pulling out a faded drawing of a lighthouse drawn by an uncertain child's hand. At the bottom, in clumsy letters, was written, "To Mom from Meredith. I love you." "Wow, did I draw this?" Meredith leaned over, looking at the drawing. "I don't remember this." "You were 6. You came to visit me at the lighthouse for the weekend and drew this before you left." "Wow," she said, surprise in her voice. "All I remember is how bored I was there." "Not always," I said, pulling out another drawing of a woman in a caretaker's uniform holding a little girl's hand. "You drew this after we went up to the observation deck to look at the stars." Meredith took the drawing, and I noticed her fingers tremble. "I completely forgot. We drank hot chocolate and you showed me the constellations." "And told me legends about them," I added. "You especially liked the story about Cassiopeia." "The vain queen who boasted of her beauty." Meredith smiled faintly. "Strange choice for a child." "Not so strange. You always loved complex characters." We stood over an open box, sifting through fragments of the past. Old photographs, school certificates, letters, the history of our family, which seemed long forgotten, but in fact was just waiting for its moment in a dusty corner of the basement. "Mom, the movers have loaded everything." Ezra peeked into the kitchen. "They say it's time to leave if we want to unload everything before dark." "Yes, of course." I closed the box. "Let's take this with us." We left the house and I turned around one last time, glancing at the old walls, the creaky porch, the overgrown garden. I had spent most of my life here. My children had grown up here. But it was time to move on. "Are you okay?" Meredith asked quietly, noticing my gaze. "I'm fine." I locked the door and put the key in my pocket. Just saying goodbye. You're not selling the house, are you? You can always come back if you want. Yes, but it won't be the same. We got into our cars, Ezra and I in my old Ford, Meredith in her Lexus, and headed for Highland View. The drive took about 20 minutes. The residential complex was located on a hill on the outskirts of town. 3 4-story buildings made of glass and stone, surrounded by well-manicured grounds. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of the central building. Unloading took less time than loading. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, all the boxes and furniture had been moved into the apartment. I paid the movers, adding a generous tip, and closed the door behind them. Well, here we are, I said, glancing around the living room filled with boxes. Now we have to unpack and arrange everything. Where shall we start? Ezra was already opening the nearest box. Let's have some tea first, I suggested, or coffee. I saw a kettle somewhere. I'll go to the cafe on the 1st floor, Meredith volunteered. I'll bring everyone coffee and something to eat. Ezra and I exchanged glances, surprised by her offer. Thanks, I said. That would be great. When Meredith left, Ezra whistled. Wow, she's really trying to be helpful. What did you do to her? Just talk to her, I said, starting to unpack the box with kitchen utensils. We're both trying to mend our relationship. And you believe her? After everything she said about you? I thought about it. Did I believe Meredith? Part of me still doubted the sincerity of her sudden transformation. But another part, the part that always hoped for the best, wanted to give her a chance. I want to believe that people can change, I finally replied, even at our age. Ezra shrugged. Well, I'll be around if she starts acting like a bitch again. Ezra, she's your mother after all. So what? That doesn't give her the right to be a bitch. I couldn't help but smile. Ezra always said what she thought, a trait I secretly admired, even though I felt it was my duty to point it out to her. Meredith returned with a tray holding 3 large cups of coffee and a paper bag with sandwiches. I hope everyone likes cappuccino, she said, setting the tray on the box. And I got turkey and avocado sandwiches. They looked delicious. Thanks, I said, taking a cup. Just what I needed. We sat down on chairs that had been hastily arranged and began to eat. The apartment's windows looked out onto the mountains, majestic snow-capped peaks that seemed very close in the clear air. What a view, Meredith remarked, looking out the window. Now I understand why you chose this apartment. It reminds me of the view from a lighthouse, I admitted. The same openness, the same feeling of infinity, except without the storms and having to climb 187 steps. Ezra smiled. Yes, that's definitely a plus, I laughed. At my age, an elevator is a significant advantage, and we spent the rest of the day unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. To my surprise, Meredith really helped, not just for show, but genuinely. She assembled the bookshelves, helped hang the curtains, and even unpacked part of my watch collection and arranged them neatly on special stands. By evening, we were tired, but most of the work was done. The apartment was starting to feel like home. My watches, from small pocket watches to impressive wall clocks, were in their places. The books were lined up on the shelves. The kitchen utensils found their drawers and cupboards. I ordered pizza, Ezra announced, returning to the living room with the phone in her hand. It'll be here in 20 minutes. Great idea, I said, sinking into an armchair, feeling my legs buzzing. I'm too old for these marathons. Nonsense. Meredith sat down across from me. You look more energetic than I do. It's just appearances, I smiled. Inside, I'm dreaming of a hot bath and a glass of wine. So what's stopping you? Ezra plopped down on the couch. You have that fancy whirlpool tub now, and I saw you packing wine. What is stopping me, indeed? I got up. I think I'll do just that. You guys enjoy your pizza. I retired to the bathroom, spacious, with the large corner tub I had long dreamed of. Filling it with hot water and adding aromatic salts, I sank into blissful bliss. Through the wall, I could hear the muffled voices of Meredith and Ezra. They were arguing about something, but without their usual aggression. Half an hour later, refreshed and dressed in comfortable loungewear, I returned to the living room. On the coffee table were open pizza boxes, a bottle of wine, and 3 glasses. Just in time, Ezra said, handing me a glass of wine. We were waiting for you to start. What were you arguing about? I asked, sitting down in an armchair. Meredith and Ezra exchanged glances. "Mom thinks I should go to college," Ezra said. "She says being a tattoo artist isn't a real career." "I think you have every chance of succeeding in a field you enjoy," I said, taking a sip of wine, "but additional education never hurts." "There!" Meredith looked triumphantly at her daughter. "Grandma agrees with me." "Not exactly," I shook my head. "I don't think Ezra should quit her job at the studio. I'm just saying she could do both. Study graphic design or art and develop her skills as a tattoo artist at the same time." "But she's wasting her potential," Meredith objected. "With her grades, she could get into law school or medical school." "And be miserable like you?" Ezra blurted out. The room fell silent. Meredith froze with a piece of pizza in her hand, stunned by her daughter's words. "What do you mean?" she finally asked. "I'm not miserable." "Come on, Mom." Ezra rolled her eyes. "You hate your job. Every day you complain about how tired you are of your clients, the cockroaches, the endless reports. You chose a prestigious profession instead of something you really enjoy, and now you're going crazy with boredom." "That's not true." Meredith straightened up. "I'm proud of my career. Pest control inspector is an important and necessary profession." "But you wanted to be a photographer," I said quietly. Meredith turned to me, surprised. "You remember?" "Of course, you had talent. Your pictures won school contests." "But it wasn't serious," she said, lowering her eyes. "Just a hobby." "Why did you decide that?" "Because—" Meredith hesitated. "Because photographers don't make enough money. It's an unreliable profession." "Who told you that?" "No one. She paused. "Actually, my dad. He said I wouldn't be able to support myself if I studied photography." "Malcolm." "Of course. My ex-husband had always been cynically practical. For him, success was measured solely in terms of money and status. And you listened to him instead of yourself." I shook my head. "That's a shame." "I didn't have a choice," Meredith almost shouted. "Someone had to be rational in this family. You sat on your pedestal. Quentin had his head in the clouds with his books, and I had to keep my feet firmly on the ground." "You had a choice, Meredith," I said gently. "There's always a choice." "I would have supported you if you had decided to pursue photography." "Really?" Her voice sounded doubtful. "You never said that." "Because you never asked my opinion. You always made all the decisions without consulting me." Meredith thought for a moment, twirling her wine glass in her hands. "Maybe you're right," she finally said. "I always thought I had to be strong and independent, like you." "Like me?" I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Yes, you always managed on your own, with the lighthouse, with us after Dad left, with everything. I thought you expected the same from me." I put down my glass and leaned toward my daughter. "Meredith, being strong doesn't mean giving up your desires. It means finding the courage to follow them despite the obstacles. That's easy to say when you don't have a family to feed," she said with a bitter smile. "I had a family, you and Quentin, and I found a way to support you by doing what I loved." "At the lighthouse? Seriously? You ended up there by accident after your divorce." "No, not by accident." I shook my head. "I've always loved the sea, lighthouses, solitude. When the opportunity to become a keeper came along, I jumped at it with both hands, and I've never regretted it, despite all the difficulties." "I didn't know that," Meredith said quietly, "because I never asked." We fell silent. Ezra looked from me to my mother, clearly surprised by the frankness of our conversation. "You know," Meredith finally said, "I recently bought a new camera, a professional one. Dexter thought I was crazy to spend so much money on a toy. How do you like it?" "I love it," she said, her face lighting up. "I've started taking pictures again. On weekends, I go out into nature or walk around the city looking for interesting shots." "That's wonderful," I smiled. "It's never too late to return to what you love." "There," Ezra exclaimed. "That's exactly what I'm trying to tell you, Mom. You should do what you love, not what's prestigious or secure." Meredith sighed. "Maybe you're right, both of you, but I still think education is necessary, as a backup plan." "I agree with that," I nodded. "Ezra, what do you think about graphic design classes? It would complement your tattooing skills and open up new opportunities." she thought. Actually, that's not a bad idea. Jaden said they always need good designers at the studio. See? I smiled. We can compromise. If Ezra agrees to take the classes, I'll stop bugging her about working at the studio, Meredith offered, and I'll even get a tattoo. What? Ezra almost choked on his pizza. Are you serious? Absolutely. A small one, somewhere where you can't see it. Meredith grinned. Maybe a camera or a compass like that sailor. Or a lighthouse, I suggested, to remind you that you used to love being there. Meredith thought about it. You know, that's not a bad idea. A lighthouse symbolizes light, showing the way. I like that. What about you, Grandma? Ezra turned to me. Have you changed your mind about the tattoo? No, I laughed. At my age, my skin isn't what it used to be, but I'd be happy to frame your lighthouse sketch and hang it on the wall. We talked late into the night. For the first time in years, Meredith and I really talked, not exchanging barbs or formalities, but sharing thoughts, memories, feelings. Ezra joined in too, sometimes surprising us both with the depth of her observations. When Meredith got ready to leave, it was past midnight. I can stay if you need help unpacking, she offered. Tomorrow's my day off. Thanks, but we'll be fine, I said, walking her to the door. Besides, Dexter's probably worried. I doubt it, she smiled. He's at his company party. He'll be back late and drunk.